You never dropped it. Not once in all these years. Someone in that room was always about to come apart, and it was never you. You were the one who noticed first, moved first, who somehow always had both hands free when everyone else's were shaking. You got good at it. So good that eventually no one in your life thought to ask if your hands were shaking too. They didn't forget to ask. They never learned there was a question to ask. There's a particular quiet that settles over a person who has been strong for so long that strength stopped being something they do and became something they simply are. Not a peaceful quiet, the kind that just means no one's checking anymore. You know that quiet. You're sitting in it right now. There was a first time. There always is, even if you stop being able to point to it. A house that got too loud or too quiet in a way that scared you. A silence at dinner that had a weight to it. The kind you could feel in your shoulders before anyone said a word. A parent whose face changed shape when things got hard, went somewhere you couldn't follow. A sibling who needed someone to be the ground underneath them because the actual ground had started to move. And you, still young enough that this shouldn't have been yours to carry. Notice that if you stood very still and very steady, the whole room could lean on you and not fall. It worked. That's the part no one tells you about becoming the strong one. It worked immediately and completely. The room calmed down when you were calm. People started coming to you first, not last. You became the person things got handed to, the decision, the difficult phone call, the version of the story that had to be told gently to someone who couldn't handle the true one. And somewhere in that, young and needing to belong to something, and terrified of being one more thing that fell apart, you learned that being needed was safer than being loved for no reason at all. It didn't stay in that house. It followed you to school, where a teacher learned your name for the wrong reason. Not because you raised your hand, but because you were the one who could walk a crying classmate to the nurse's office without making it a whole thing. It followed you into your first real friendships, where you became the one people called at 11 at night, not the one who called. It followed you into whatever job you ended up in, where somehow you became the coworker trusted with the version of bad news that had to be delivered gently. None of these people knew each other. None of them compared notes. And yet, independently, every one of them arrived at the same conclusion about you, because you kept giving them the same evidence without ever meaning to run the experiment. This is the part we're sitting with, without rushing past it to the part where it cost you something. It wasn't a flaw that put you here. It was a skill, sharpened out of necessity, that actually did what it was built to do. There's a reason it's hard to stay angry at the child who figured this out. They didn't invent a manipulation. They found the only working switch in a house full of broken ones, and they threw it, because the alternative was watching everything fall apart with empty hands. You held things together that would have come apart without you. That's not nothing. That's not a story about weakness dressed up as strength. It's a story about a child who found the one lever in the house that worked and pulled it over and over until pulling it became who they were. That's worth remembering on the nights this feels like something to be ashamed of. It was never shame. It was survival wearing a very calm face. The trouble was never that it didn't work. The trouble is that nothing was ever built to let you put it down. There was no version of the story where you got to be the one who needed holding, because by the time you might have needed it, you had already become the person everyone else needed to be held by. The role filled every available slot. There wasn't a smaller role hiding underneath it, waiting for its turn. The room got quieter about it as the years went on. Not because anyone forgot, but because a working system doesn't announce itself. It just keeps running. Nobody was cruel enough to hand you that role on purpose. It's just that once a room finds someone who'll hold, the room stops looking for anyone else who might. The mask you're wearing isn't really a mask. A mask can be lifted off and set down without consequence. This is closer to a wall the rest of the house leans on. Take it down and there's no soft, ordinary self quietly waiting behind it. There's only the frame everything else got built onto, suddenly asked to hold its own weight for the first time. Jung had a name for the face we build to meet the world. Persona, an old word for a theater mask. He was right that it's social, shaped in relation to the people around us. What reaches beyond anything he mapped out directly is what happens when that mask becomes load-bearing, a contract negotiated so early and so wordlessly you don't remember signing it. You would be the one who doesn't fall apart. In exchange, you would be the one who's needed, relied upon, kept close. Not loved, necessarily, needed. For a child trying to survive an unstable house, those two things can look identical. This is easy to mistake for martyrdom, or for a simple lack of boundaries, the kind of thing a weekend workshop promises to fix in 3 sessions. But martyrdom is usually visible even to the person doing it. There's a kind of exhausted pride in it. This is quieter than that. You don't feel like a martyr, you feel like yourself. The persona isn't a costume you're choosing to wear for other people's benefit. It's simply what you call yourself when you look in the mirror, which is exactly why it's so hard to set down. Nobody around you would call what you're doing a sacrifice. They just call it Tuesday, because that's how invisible the whole arrangement has become. Here's the part worth sitting with longer than feels comfortable, even if it reaches beyond anything Jung wrote directly. A persona, this useful, doesn't just live in you. It lives in the system around you too. Families, friend groups, workplaces. Most of them settle into a shape, and that shape tends to include a few fixed points. People the whole structure quietly leans on to hold steady. You became one of those, and a fixed point isn't only a role you perform, it's a role other people's stability has come to depend on, which is one way of reading why the people around you were never simply failing to notice your exhaustion. Without meaning to, without knowing they were doing it, they may have needed you to stay exactly as strong as you'd always been, because your steadiness was carrying weight for them too. This isn't a story where everyone else benefits and you simply pay for it. The system got something real out of your steadiness, real safety, real relief, a real place to put its own fear. That doesn't make the arrangement fair. It only makes it harder to blame anyone cleanly for keeping it running. Notice which direction the care moves. It flows toward you, into the people who need holding, easily, almost automatically. It does not flow back. Not because anyone decided you didn't deserve it. Nobody sat down and made that decision. But because the whole shape of the relationship only has one channel built into it, and the channel only runs one way. You've probably never noticed the shape of it, because noticing would mean asking why. And asking why would mean admitting there's a why to ask about. You can be endlessly available to catch someone else's fall. What was never built was a version of you that gets caught. This is the part that doesn't fit into the story, where you simply need to learn to ask for help better. The need to be cared for didn't vanish from you. In this reading, it went where a lot of what a persona can't hold ends up, into the shadow, the part of the psyche carrying whatever couldn't be let into the light without threatening the structure built around it. It isn't shameful material the way some shadow content is. It isn't a secret cruelty or a hidden appetite. It's simply a need that never had a door built for it. Because every door in that house, in that friend group, in that family already had a function. And none of those functions was the strong one gets to need something too. Jung noticed that material like this rarely disappears quietly. It tends to return sideways, in forms the conscious mind doesn't recognize as the same thing. A flash of irritation at someone for asking too little. A wave of exhaustion that arrives with no clear cause. A strange grief that shows up at the wrong moments for what looks like the wrong reasons. Sometimes in Jungian language, this gets called persona identification. When the mask fuses so completely with a sense of self that the person can no longer locate where the performance ends and they begin. It isn't that you're lying when you say you're fine. It's that the part of you that would know the real answer has had so little practice being asked. It may not have one ready even now. Ask yourself right now what the honest answer would be if someone you trusted looked you directly in the eye tonight and asked how you're really doing. Not the checking in kind of asking, the kind that actually waits for an answer. If there's a small, genuine pause before anything comes to mind, that pause is the evidence. That's the muscle that hasn't been used. A man standing at a kitchen counter, close to midnight, coat still on. He came straight from someone else's emergency and hasn't found the motion yet that turns him back into someone off duty. Phone in his hand, a contact list gone quiet from disuse. Not because there's no one in it, but because every name has, at some point, called him for exactly this. The sentence sits right at the edge of his mouth. I don't think I can hold this one too. It doesn't leave. He sets the phone down instead and sits in the almost dark. The one room tonight where no one is depending on him to be fine. Here's a sentence that's hard to sit inside because it doesn't blame anyone, and blame would almost be easier to carry than this. No one is coming. And the more honest reading isn't that they don't love you. It's that somewhere along the way, without either of you noticing the lesson happening, you taught them this particular door didn't need checking. You were that convincing at being the one who's fine. Whatever kept the people around you from asking, it likely wasn't neglect. It was trust in the only version of you they'd ever been shown. That's not an indictment of them. It's just math. You can only respond to the version of a person that's been shown to you over and over until you'd have no reason left to doubt it. There was probably a specific night once. You could likely find it if you looked, when you almost said it. Standing in a kitchen or a parking lot or on the other end of a phone call that had already gone on too long, some sentence rose up in you close enough to speak. And then something quieter and faster than thought moved in ahead of it. And by the time you opened your mouth, what came out instead was, I'm fine. Don't worry about me. Nobody forced those words out of you. You reached for them the way your hand finds a light switch in a familiar dark room, automatically, before you've even registered that you needed the light. This is the recognition that doesn't come with relief attached. It would be simpler if the people around you were careless or cruel or simply hadn't been paying attention. There'd be somewhere to put the hurt. But most of them love you exactly as much as they seem to. They've just never once had reason to imagine you underneath the strength, because you never gave them the reason. Because giving them the reason would have meant becoming, even briefly, the person who needs holding instead of the person who does the holding. And some part of you decided a very long time ago that this particular trade was not one you were willing to make. That's a strange kind of grief. Grieving something no one did wrong. There is no clean villain in this story. That's the part that makes it so hard to finally look at directly. You can't be angry at people for failing to see something you spent your whole life making sure they'd never have to see. The people around you weren't the ones who built this. You built it together without a blueprint, a long time before either side had the language for what was happening. The persona did exactly what it was built to do. It's still doing it. It's doing it right now in the careful, composed way you're able to sit with this sentence without falling apart, adhering it. Even this, even staying this steady while reading your own reckoning, is the persona, still working exactly as designed, still doing the one job it was ever asked to do. Most nights, that's exactly what happens again. The door stays closed, nobody checks, and you go on being fine, because that's still the only script anyone's ever handed you. It sounds so reasonable when someone says it. It rarely feels reasonable at 11 at night, alone, doing the math on who would still be there if you finally, for once, weren't fine. There's a version of this that wants to end somewhere warmer than this. It's okay to ask for help, someone will say, meaning well, meaning it kindly, and it will land wrong every time because that was never the missing piece. You always knew you were allowed to ask. Permission was never the wall. The wall is that asking can feel like dismantling the exact thing that has kept you safe, needed, and held together for as long as you can remember. And no amount of being told it's okay makes that feel any less like tearing down a structure that's held for decades, with no blueprint for what replaces it. Even now, even having heard all of this, some part of you is already calculating how quickly you could recover if you tried it once and it went wrong. Because that's the part of you that's been running this operation the whole time, and it doesn't stop just because you've named it. You don't have to be strong all the time. Someone else will offer, and this one is gentler and still misses by the same distance. It imagines strength as a shift you clock in and out of. Something you could, in theory, set down for an evening and pick back up tomorrow. But this was never a shift. It was an identity, built cell by cell out of every moment someone needed you to be the one who doesn't break. You cannot set an identity down the way you switch off a light. There's no wall switch for it. Even therapy, real therapy, good therapy, tends to arrive at this from the direction of skills. Communication skills, boundary setting, self-advocacy, as if the whole architecture could be rewired through better vocabulary. Some of that helps in its own slower way over years, not evenings. But it's worth being honest about what it doesn't do. It doesn't undo the years the pattern had a head start. It doesn't erase the reflex that reaches for, I'm fine, before you've even finished registering the question. Learning the right words for what you need has never been the same thing as being able to use them in the moment you actually need them. None of this is an argument against getting help. It's an argument against expecting help to move at the speed the wound was created. So this stays here, unresolved, because resolving it would be another kind of lie. The kind where a stranger's voice tells you this ends in 3 easy steps, and something in you, exhausted and still holding, quietly knows better than to believe it. Nothing here promises this gets easier, or lighter, or different by next year. That might sound bleak, stated so plainly. It isn't meant as bleak, only honest. There's a difference between a story that lies to you gently and a story that simply doesn't promise anything it can't keep. This isn't a story with a door out of the room. It's a story about staying long enough in the room to finally notice you're in one. The room doesn't change size because you finally looked at its walls. It just stops pretending to be a hallway. Maybe nothing changes tonight. Maybe you close this and go back to being exactly as steady as you were this morning, because that's what the day requires, and the day doesn't care what you just sat with. That's fine. That's not failure. Nobody hands out credit for closing a video and finally admitting something to yourself in the dark. There's no scoreboard for this. Some recognitions don't ask to be acted on right away. They just ask to be let in quietly and left somewhere you can find them again later, on some other night, when the coat comes off a little slower than usual and you notice it. Tomorrow, if someone needs you, and someone will, you'll probably still be the one who shows up steady, because that's not a decision you make fresh every morning. It's just who you've become, and becoming isn't undone by one video, one quiet hour, one honest sentence said to no one. This isn't the part where the story turns. There isn't a turn coming. This isn't about whether the pattern is right or wrong. Patterns like this rarely are, cleanly one or the other. It's just about knowing, finally, which one you're standing inside. You are the strong one. You may go on being the strong one for a long time yet. Maybe someday you'll be somewhere, a kitchen, a parking lot, 11 at night, and the sentence will come out instead of the usual one. Or maybe it won't. Not this year, not the next. Either way, something in you now knows the difference between the 2 sentences, which is not the same as being able to choose between them yet. But there might be somewhere in you tonight one small, unspectacular thing that's different now. Not a plan, not a resolution, just the fact that you finally said the true sentence to yourself, even if to no one else. No one held you, and you know that now. That's not nothing. Some nights, that's all there is.